there is a point where skill stops looking like skill. Not because it becomes sloppy, not because it fails, but because it succeeds so completely that the explanation starts to feel less believable than the thing itself. Because the object in front of you begins behaving in ways that violate what the material is physically supposed to do. And your brain, which knows the difference between stone and flesh, between cold and warm, between rigid and elastic, quietly stops trusting itself. That is the specific crisis this sculpture creates. Not wonder, not admiration, something closer to disorientation. Inside the Galleria Borghese in Rome, there is a group of figures carved primarily from one block of Carrara marble. It shows the underworld god Pluto seizing the goddess Proserpina at the moment of her abduction, her body twisting away from him, one arm pushing against his face, her torso arching backward in desperate escape. He holds her lifted off the ground, arms locked around her waist and thigh, and his fingers are sinking into her flesh. That is not a metaphor. That is not a description of artistic suggestion or graceful implication. Pluto's fingers are pressing into the surface of Proserpina's thigh, and the marble is responding the way. Skin responds under pressure. It compresses. It bulges between his fingers. The surface deforms with the exact convincing yield of living tissue under violent force. Except it is stone. Cold, brittle, crystalline Carrara marble. The same material that shatters under hammer strikes. The same material that cannot bend, cannot stretch, cannot yield to pressure without fracturing. A material defined at the molecular level by its absolute rigidity. And yet the thigh yields. This is the first problem with this sculpture. Not its beauty, not its scale, or ambition, or mythology. The first problem is that your eyes reject what your brain already knows to be true. You understand that this is stone. You can see that this is stone. But the visual information arriving from Pluto's grip tells your nervous system that what it is looking at is soft, elastic, warm tissue being compressed by real force. The material is lying to you, and understanding how that lie was constructed makes the sculpture harder to believe, not easier. Gian Lorenzo Bernini was 23 years old when he completed this group, in the year 1622. Not 23 at the beginning of a long career, looking back on this as early work. 23 at completion of a sculpture that art historians would later call one of the most technically demanding objects ever carved from marble. He was working under commission from Cardinal Scipione Borghese, one of the most powerful men in Rome, nephew to Pope Paul V, the collector whose favor could make or destroy a sculptor's career in the papal court. Museum records document payment to Bernini of 300 scudi in June of 1621, with the work still underway. He was a young man carving under intense scrutiny, inside a world where reputation was everything, and one catastrophic fracture would be visible to everyone. But Bernini was not simply trying to impress a patron. He was trying to defeat a predecessor. Michelangelo had spent his career working inside a particular conviction about marble, that the body existed inside the block, waiting to be released, that the sculptor's task was revelation rather than invention. That philosophy produced transcendent work, but it also drew a kind of invisible boundary around what stone was permitted to do. Flesh in marble, under Michelangelo, was serene, idealized, resolved. Bernini wanted flesh that was neither serene nor resolved. He wanted flesh that was actively failing to escape. To produce that effect, he did something a conservative sculptor would never risk. He deliberately weakened a structurally critical section of load-bearing marble. Pluto's grip falls on Proserpina's thigh, a region that carries significant weight in the overall composition. Removing material there, creating the depth needed to simulate real compression, risked fracturing the stone at precisely the point where structural integrity mattered most. Any experienced craftsman would have softened the effect, pulled back from the edge, chosen safety over conviction. Bernini carved deeper. The technique he used was not simply undercutting. He worked with abrasives across the surface of the flesh, creating microscopic roughness, gradients that interact with light the way skin texture does, absorbing it slightly rather than returning it clean the way polished stone does. The result is a surface that appears to have give, that appears to yield. Alongside this, the precise depth of the finger impressions causes the marble between them to read as tissue, bulging under lateral pressure, because that is exactly what it is imitating. The illusion is structural and optical simultaneously. It does not merely suggest softness, it models softness through physics, and he achieved this while solving an entirely separate problem. The two figures in this group are not standing. They are in violent off-center motion. Proserpina's weight is lifted and twisted, her body extended outward from Pluto's torso in a diagonal that projects mass away from the narrow supporting base. Two human bodies in extreme dynamic postures, held aloft in marble with no internal metal armature. The composition should not stand. The center of gravity should not resolve. And yet it does, because Bernini disguised the engineering solution as part of the myth itself. The three-headed Cerberus crouching at Pluto's feet functions as a structural buttress, a mass of stone counterbalancing the cantilevered weight above it. Even the monster at the gate of the underworld is doing load calculations. Now look at the hair. Pluto's beard is drilled and chiseled into wild, coarse volume, rough to the eye, textured, agitated. Proserpina's hair is carved in flowing curves that separate into distinct strands, catching light with a completely different character. The drapery has been worked with a rasp, creating a surface friction different from both. And the skin, both bodies, carries the abraded softness described above, polished to a luminosity that reads as warmth. This is one block of marble, behaving like four different materials. The scholar Howard Hibbard wrote of the yielding flesh in this sculpture as evidence of an extraordinary technical achievement. Bernini producing what no chisel should have been able to produce, which is the textural evidence of physical pressure in an inert material. The art historian Rudolf Witt-Koer argued that the dynamic conception of this group influenced depictions of violent movement in sculpture for more than 150 years. These are not expressions of admiration. They are attempts to account for a technical fact that remains difficult to explain even in retrospect. And then the sculpture shifts. Somewhere in the upper third of the composition, not immediately obvious, not the first thing the eye reaches for. There are tears on Proserpina's cheek. They were mentioned early, so perhaps you have been waiting for them. But waiting for them and arriving at them are different things because the tears do not function the way you expect them to. They are not decorative. They are not symbolic shorthand. They are carved with such precision and delicacy that they appear temporary, not frozen in marble, but somehow still, in the process of falling, as though one more second might see them drop from the cheek entirely. To carve them, Bernini had to work at micro scale in hard stone, while the rest of the composition was already complete. Any excessive force, any miscalculation in the final passes of the chisel could have fractured the marble at the face, the most visible and unrecoverable location in the entire group. He carved them anyway. Last, it appears, when the accumulated risk of everything that had come before was already embedded in the marble, and a single error would have destroyed it. This is the moment where the sculpture stops being about technical virtuosity, because the tears do not add to what came before. They rewrite it. Before the tears, this work is a spectacle of force. Before the tears, the eye tracks the violence of the grip, the impossible compression, the structural audacity of two bodies suspended in impossible balance. It is astonishing. It is disturbing. It is everything the title promises. But the tears reveal that beneath all of that, Proserpina's face has been quietly recording something the body could not. Not panic, not the physical effort of struggle, something quieter and more final. The understanding that the struggle is already lost. The tears are not produced by pain. They are produced by the moment when a person knows what is about to happen and knows they cannot stop it. Bernini carved that moment into hard stone, and by doing so, he changed what the rest of the sculpture means. The compression of the thigh is no longer simply a technical marvel. It is evidence of the force behind the tears. The balance of the composition is no longer simply an engineering solution. It is the physical structure of inevitability. Two bodies moving together in a direction that cannot be reversed. This was always the sculpture Bernini was making. The technical virtuosity was in service of something he understood very precisely, that beauty and violence cannot always be separated, that a moment can be both extraordinary and unbearable, that the same object which makes your nervous system reject the material can make your nervous system accept the grief, that the most disturbing art is not the kind that shocks you, but the kind that makes you feel something real inside, something that is definitively not real. Michelangelo's marble was serene because suffering, in his understanding, resolved into meaning, into something bearable, upward-looking, transfigured. Bernini's marble is serene and unbearable simultaneously. The grief does not resolve. The tears do not stop falling. The grip does not loosen. And the stone, which cannot feel any of this, holds it all permanently, without deterioration, without the mercy of forgetting. This is the final contradiction this sculpture creates and refuses to answer. Carrara marble is one of the coldest materials available to the human hand. Touch it, and it conducts heat away from your skin immediately than wood, more aggressively than metal at room temperature. The polished flesh Bernini carved would feel more definitively lifeless under the fingers than almost any other surface in the Galleria Borghese. And yet, this is the warmest object in the room. Not because of any property of the stone, but because Bernini forced the stone to carry something the stone has no mechanism for carrying. Panic, grief, the specific temperature of a body. In the moment before everything changes, He forced material defined by coldness and rigidity to become the permanent home of everything hot and elastic and briefly, terribly alive. 4 centuries later, nothing about that contradiction has been resolved. The marble is still cold. Is it still stone? Or is it something else by now? Something that has been looked at so long, that has held so much human feeling inside its rigid surface, that the material has become secondary to what lives inside it. That is not a question this sculpture answers. That is the question it keeps asking.